Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any organization. Let's go to the podcast. Doug McDowell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, we hung out a little bit at the academy. I think we were in third reg together.
Correct.
Man, those were...
And crossed paths many times, though.
We did.
I don't think I can recall one moment, but I know you clearly. So
that's right. I can't remember what the circumstances were, but gee, I remember you.
That's right.
Boy, if I could had a nickel for every time I heard that in my life. But so, talk a little bit about where you're at now and what's going on.
So I'm president of McDowell and Associates. It's a company my uncle founded in 1978.
Really? Okay.
Interesting. He was at the academy for graduation, and he walked up to me and said, if the Army doesn't work out, you've always got a place here. That's what. So that was kind of the prompting that.
Well, that's a good thing to hear at graduation.
Yeah.
My old man walked up to me and says, "You have no fallback position."
Yeah, so I had a backup right from the day I got the diploma.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But we're an engineering company. We very interesting. One of our classmates earlier said she's a geotechnical engineer.
Yeah,
and that's what McDowell and Associates does. We're a geotechnical engineering firm. That's what we were founded as. So we study soil, groundwater, drill holes in the ground. My specialty is environmental. I do a lot of environmental assessments.
Yeah.
Urban redevelopment's a big thing I love to do, and I love taking beat up places in the city and turning them around. So
really, fun. And now did McDowell and Associates act as kind of a North Star that got you into environmental sciences, or was that a natural?
I kind of, when I was going through the process of getting out of the Army, I was thinking about different career paths, and I knew McDowell Associates was there, but I just looked at different areas that I thought would be good places to go, and thought environmental seemed to be a up and coming area where success could follow. So that's why I pursued environmental.
And so, what are the types of projects that you all work on? Because I don't know anything about this. It sounds interesting.
It's mostly related to real estate. So in some cases, we assess vacant property, and look at it from both an environmental standpoint and a soil strength and groundwater table standpoint for a developer. Some of our clients are national home builders, Pulte Homes, for example, Toll Brothers. You probably heard of them. So we work for them in the region. We're pretty much the regional expert, if you will, for what we do, and we have name brand recognition across the residential building community. But we also do work for commercial builder developers, industrial builder developers. Our Midland office, we do a lot of work for Dow Chemical and its various offshoots. If you know about Dow, it merged with I can't think of the name of the company, and then they split into a bunch of fragments, and we serve all of those out of our Midland office. And we work for a number of industrial property owners here in the Detroit market as well.
Now, as the president, how many folks are in the firm?
65.
Oh, it's
So we got 65 employees.
You're running a lot of people stuff, I imagine.
Yeah. So it's I've got a number of department managers that really carry the ball. My role now is the company's kind of in transition. We're buying out some of our older shareholders, so we're making sure we have the funds to be able to do that in a way that doesn't impinge operations. And I'm trying to improve our systems so that we can grow, because we've been flat for a while, and I want to make a strong base so we can get bigger.
Yeah, there you go. Good for you. You're a Hoosier. You grew up in Indiana.
I am a Hoosier.
Talk about that. So, which remind us which town you're from, because as we talked about just before we started filming, that your howitzer entry is incorrect.
That's right. And if you were a plebe with me, how every class we went to first semester, every person we met wanted to know where we were from.
Yeah.
Every time I said Bluffton, Indiana, I was required to spell it. So a lot of our classmates know how to spell Bluffton
because it's such an exotic name.
Yeah. Town on the Bluff. How on earth a bunch of military guys can't figure that out? I don't know.
Yeah, right. Where is Bluffton, Indiana?
South of Fort Wayne, about
Okay.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep. Little farming community. Nice town.
Yeah, yeah. And then what got you interested in the academy? So Bluffton, Indiana, that's a big
Interesting.
throw, right?
I was born and raised in Fort Wayne. I grew up in the city, and we may get to this later. I single mom. I
Mhm.
was raised in a pretty humble beginning, only white kid on the block.
Uh-huh.
And uh, as I grew, at some point I decided that I wanted to go to college, which was unusual for folks from my family tree. But
Yep.
I started reading a lot of Civil War books for some reason. And in my elementary school library, I had plowed through all the Civil War books twice.
Yeah.
There weren't any left, so then I moved on to World War II, and I picked up a book that was Douglas MacArthur's biography.
Right.
And so about the time I decided to go to college, I was reading Douglas MacArthur's biography, and in that book, 6th grade now, this is true, there was about 3 pages where he talked about wanting to go to West Point, but he wanted to do it on his own. He didn't want to ride his father or grandfather's coattails.
Right.
So it went through all the stuff he did in high school to make sure he accumulated the leadership, the sports, and the scholarship to get into the academy legitimately.
Right.
And I figured that while I might not go to West Point, if I did all that stuff, I'd certainly be able to get a scholarship to go to college, because my mom wasn't going to be able to pay for me to go to college.
Yeah.
So that was a route I embarked on. So 7th and 8th grade, I started practicing that. And when I hit 9th grade, I was on fire and doing everything I could.
And what was on the list?
Up that resume.
What was on the list? Because I guess reading about MacArthur, equitation probably wasn't as important in the 1980s or 1970s right. At the time. But what was on the list for you?
I did. I was a 3-sport athlete.
Okay.
So I did football, wrestling, track, and then when everybody else grew and I was sick of being on the meet squad, I moved over to cross country instead of football. Stayed in wrestling and and track and field for 4 years though. So 3-sport athlete. I did all the choirs we had. I did all the bands we had. I was a pretty good trumpet player. So I did a lot of music and was pretty busy. It was not unusual for me to be at school at 5:30 for a choir practice before school, and then have a athletic competition or training after school, and then have another music thing after that, and do a 12, 16-hour day at school.
So you had a great prep for West Point. I mean, you were busy all the time in high school, and it's just busy again.
And then I got smoked when I got to West Point. But
how did you find the so coming out of the Fort Wayne area, you reached our day? How did you find that?
Pretty shocking. I had no idea what to expect, other than what I read in the MacArthur book, right?
Yeah.
But so I was unprepared for the rigors of that. One of the things I did that was a mistake. I had to get black shoes, and I was a pretty frugal guy back then, coming from a humble background. So I had black shoes from swing choir that I had worn when we did swing choir training and competitions. Right. Those were the shoes I wore on our day. I didn't know it, but my arches fell on our day. The next morning, when I jumped out of the second bunk and landed on the floor, I collapsed to the floor. So I was one of our few classmates that graduated that was on sick call day 2 of Beast Barracks.
Really?
Oh yeah. I had to go to Keller Army Hospital. I got arch supports and they fitted me for orthotics, but yeah, that was a defining moment. I could have been boarded out that day. I was hurting pretty bad. Could hardly walk.
No kidding. Oh, yeah. And that's pretty enlightened of them to like sort you out and keep you going rather than just. And then how long did it take to get back to where you could, do activity again after?
Next day, I was up and running again.
Next day,
as soon as I got he handmade me some cushioned arch supports, and I wore those black tennis shoes we were issued for with our Gym Alpha. And
no
the
kidding.
arch supports in there, it worked out for me. I was able to go right back to it.
Now you ended up in I2 as a plebe.
Correct. That was a fun time.
What was I2 like?
It was good. It was good. I had, I'm trying to think of the different folks. The one challenge of I2 was we were on the 6th floor.
Right.
In central area. And so that was a lot of pinging up and down the stairs. I was also a walk-on on the track team. And somewhere along the way, trying to keep up with PJ Gross and Tom Zoka, I strained my Achilles tendon. And that's not an obvious injury, right? So if you're not pinging with an Achilles tendon injury, people assume you're anyway. So I got harassed a lot as I was trying to recover from my Achilles tendon. But the six flights up the stairs to my room were no fun, and I just avoided the elevator because that was more of a haze. So
yours was a journey of nagging injuries.
Yeah. I'll never forget the day we were issued trunks. And you remember the trunks, how big they were?
Yeah.
Well, at the time I was pretty fit. I was able to carry one trunk on each shoulder and ping the six flights of stairs in I2 to get them up to my room like that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you would have been a good guy to know.
Nothing like that anymore. What's that?
I couldn't even drag one up the stairs. Boy, you'd have been a good guy to have in the squad.
Yeah. I remember those 6 flights of stairs.
And then who were some of the characters? Was that a haze company or was that a relaxed company? What was I2?
Not really, it was fine. I do remember the first day walking into the hallway, there was a guy named Kucheravi that was taking Russian, and he decided to haze everybody in Russian when we stepped into the hallway.
Right.
And that was an adventure.
Right.
But no, it was good. I had I don't know, Jamie Joyner didn't graduate with us. He was my first roommate, and Matt Van Kirk, you might have known him. He was a recruited football player that really struggled to keep his weight on.
Okay.
Yeah, they were my first roommates. No, it was a good class.
Yeah. And what, so boxing, all the different activities, how did you find plebe year? Because I'm actually shocked. Some people say, well, plebe year was no problem. I just came in and did my thing. Other people had a real hard time. Where was your head on plebe year?
I didn't mind it. I'll say I actually enjoyed boxing. Although I had calculus after boxing,
right,
which was like the worst possible class to go into with a headache, right? Yeah.
All I could do is the basic math of counting stars after boxing.
That was an adventure. I remember one. I was not really a very good boxer, but I enjoyed the fighting part of it. So
okay,
yeah, I remember a few of those matches. Jim Radecki, I boxed. Dalvin McKnight, believe it or not, I boxed even though he was a lot bigger than me. He had cut weight for 150s, and he must have got in for boxing at the exact right moment because he was in a class.
Yeah, thanks so much for cutting weight at the. Oh my goodness. What was your event in track?
I was an 800-meter runner when I got to Army.
Okay.
But I probably was a longer distance runner. Didn't know it as I grew and developed at West Point. After getting off the track team, I realized I was a pretty good distance runner. But I never really ran.
It's a good skill to have as an Army officer, that's for sure.
That worked out. It was fun.
What? So did you stay on the track team for a little bit, plebe year?
I was just there 4 months. That I wrote that in my LinkedIn thing. 4 months on the Army track team. But there was we did some work with the 800-meter runners. Ran with the cross country team for a while, and then when indoor track started, they brought us in for a tryout for the 800. So they had us run an 800, and everybody in front of me made the team. Everybody, me and behind, got cut. But I in protest, I was recovering from that Achilles injury, so I really wasn't anywhere near 100%.
Well, I believe in running circles, that's called the pacer. So I mean, there was a certain dignity to it, I guess.
Yeah. The miraculous thing about that, though, that happened maybe 2 weeks before finals or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I went from being incredibly sleep deprived and unable to keep my eyes open in class to all of a sudden I could pay attention.
Yeah.
And I raised my GPA remarkably and actually made
just by being more able to sleep. Yeah.
Being able to focus. And remember stuff. It was amazing.
It's an amazing payoff to be an athlete at the academy, or it's an amazing balancing act because you're putting so much energy into the sport in an institution that doesn't really, it needs all your energy just to basically make it through the middle.
Unbelievable. We have classmates that are starmen and course squad athletes and
amazing,
all Americans. I mean, just unbelievable people to achieve that, because I got crushed trying to keep up with the Division I track.
I just sat there trying to do, math after boxing, and I was a somewhat of an American, right? So not all American, just partially American, because man, it was something else. And so now your plebe year ended, F3, where we ended up on the you and I both ended up on the back in the 3rd Regiment. How'd you find that? Because F3 was had a reputation as a company prior to you getting there, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a hate company. There was some of that lingering.
Which class was that? Usually one class kind of gets in their head they're going to be tough. Was that the 83 group?
It must have been, although there was some of that in 84.
Some of it lingered,
the brigade commander came out of F3 when we were yearlings, and they had a lot of highly motivated cadets. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
F3, we were our class anyway. We were a little more laid back and casual about everything.
I think it's an interesting, kind of psychological, the waves of a company, right? So a company will be a Hayes company in 2 years, and then 3 years later, it's more relaxed. And it's just kind of like I think that would be an interesting thing to look at, is how one class
social dynamics of the the sinusoidal
right, because factor. You come in and you feel like they're being tough and you want to relax a little bit, and then by the time you get to the point where you feel like there's too relaxed, I don't know, there's something there, but I'm too lazy to study it.
Good thing about F3, it was the 1st floor, so I went from the 6th floor down to the 1st floor.
That's nice, right?
Massively better. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you're still carrying 2 trunks, one on each shoulder, I imagine.
I at that time I could still carry 2 trunks, empty trunks.
Right.
I'll emphasize that.
So F3. So now we get a little more choice of it, but there's a big entry in the old howitzer about the Glee Club. Talk about that.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember exactly when Glee Club tryout was, but I tried out for that, and I had been a baritone bass in high school, although I'd been in pretty good choral programs. And so we get in there, and he starts playing, and I'd sing, and then he'd play some low stuff. I'd sing some low stuff. And then he just kept going higher and higher and higher, and I kept singing the notes. And he looked at me, he goes, "You're a first tenor." I'm like, didn't know that. So I went from thinking I was on the lower end of the bass clef to being above the lines. So that was an interesting transition, but I adapted to that, and I found that I could really control my voice in high register pretty well.
That's amazing. So you discovered you were a long distance runner, and your
first tenor.
Your voice level was first tenor, right? So a voyage of discovery.
Yeah.
And so that took a lot of time, because I've had a chance to talk to the Glee Club in this podcast. That's a lot of travel, a lot of time.
An amazing amount of travel. It seemed like, not necessarily yearling year, but Cowan first year, we were probably, it seemed like every weekend. I mean, but we were very rarely doing drill with you. But
we missed you out there. We talked about it. Said, "Where's old Doug?" I don't know. He's probably down in New Orleans having a hurricane at this point. No, dress left, dress, and the rest of us.
The coolest thing about that component of the Glee Club, though, was the travel was based in people's houses. So when we traveled, we would break into small groups and go live in people's houses with them.
Right.
And over the course of that 3 years at the academy, I gained such an appreciation for American culture and its consistencies across the country, and then also the regional differences, depending on what region of the country you're in. I never would have seen that had I not been in the Glee Club. And it was what an injection of patriotism. I mean, it was really, really a cool experience. The other part of that, staying with classmates. So Gary Mealy, I went to his house. I went to Jim Radecki's house in New Hampshire. Jim, his dad's amazing. His dad was Hungarian, I believe, and he and his brother escaped during the Cold War. The brother was killed trying to get across the border, and Jim's dad made it to some refugee holding camp.
Wow.
In order to get to the U.S., he had to agree to join the Army. He did. So he joined the Army, didn't speak a word of English, got all the way through basic training. At airborne school, they tried to push him out of a tower, and he turned around and punched the sergeant. And that was when they discovered he couldn't speak English. So then he had to go to English training. Then he went back to airborne school. He ended up getting out as a colonel.
No
so
kidding.
He served in Korea and Vietnam. Amazing career.
We're going to get Jim on here. That's amazing.
Yeah, really interesting guy. Rod Sturdivant, stayed at Rod Sturdivant's house. Fred Choi. This is an interesting story. We got to Fred's house. We were cows, and there were cars everywhere. Like this whole subdivision was just loaded with cars. And we get to Fred's house and open the door, and I swear every Korean in Southern California was at Fred's house that night, because Fred hadn't been home for 2 years because he'd been in STAP every summer. So this was his first trip home. It was a Glee Club trip when he was a cow. Anyway,
that's fantastic. Just mobbed really cool. With family, friends, people who've casually met him when he was a kid, That's fantastic.
Everybody they knew came to that party. Anyway, it was really fun.
Right. You're like, what is going on here?
Exactly right. Huge buffet table of authentic Korean cuisine, right?
Fantastic. I think, the stories out of the Glee Club are legend. I mean, the places you all went, pictures from Colorado, and I mentioned New Orleans, and there's always some sort of beach involved.
Mm-hmm. A lot of that. The other thing I did with Glee Club, I think, and I didn't see it in the Howitzer. Maybe I missed it, but we formed a group called the Group Tones, and it started with Fred Choi and Tom Gilchrist and I, and we brought a couple cows in, Kurt Bodiford and Kevin Talley, and we did kind of a doo-wop sound, and we sang during the intermissions for the Glee Club, and then when we were firsties, that group, we traveled on our own some too. We did a few trips. If West Point needed some musical representation somewhere, they sent our group, and that was a great time. Worked on those highs again, but that was a really fun musical experience and a fun traveling experience also. The coolest thing I ever did as a cadet, I haven't shared this with you before. Were you in C4? Is that right? Is that what I've heard?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar with the old grad parade, the CF&I company parade?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was an I3 as well. So
okay. Well, I was I2 and then F3. So I had 4 opportunities to do that parade. I think I did 3 of them, if not all 4 of them. That was my favorite parade. So I actually, we had to stand there for a long time, of course, waiting for the old grad in the wheelchair to meander his way across the plain with the wreath. But I really enjoyed that parade. But another component, do you remember when Master Sergeant Benavides gave a speech?
I do.
Okay. So every year, the superintendent invited Medal of Honor winners to his quarters, and they had a party there. And I don't know how many of our classmates are aware of this, but the Glee Club would always send a small group to sing at that event.
See, there's the Glee Club once again.
Thank you. Got me into another event. But so when we were yearlings, it was very unusual for a yearling to do that. But I was a pretty good first tenor, and there was a first tenor who had really bad laryngitis. So at the last minute, I was invited to join that group. So I was able to attend the Medal of Honor event at the superintendent's quarters 3 times when we were cadets. And I don't know that there was a more amazing experience other than that experience to be in a house with, I don't know, 30, 40 Medal of Honor winners.
Wow.
It was really hard to imagine. Some of them were like quite young and would have gotten the Medal of Honor when we didn't have wars going on. And so I wonder if they were maybe CIA or some other kind of,
right.
But amazing experience to be in a place with all those great people. I shook General Doolittle's hand twice on
Holy cow.
consecutive years. I mean, I got to meet some really amazing men, and that was probably the most meaningful cadet experience I had was those three events.
Absolutely. You couldn't have a better advertisement for the Glee Club, because
exactly right.
It's not just about the singing, it's about the people you meet. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, that old grad parade was terrific, because I did it both from C Cup 4 and from I3.
Yeah.
And we used to sit in that line there. And of course, we'd pick people out and, you know, what's that guy's deal? Look at the hair on that guy, whatever. We're staying there at attention, of course.
Exactly.
Fast forward years later is our own chance to do that parade. And
That's
so we were standing out there. I knew exactly what everyone was saying, all the cadets, because we'd done that so many times out there on the plane, the whole ceremony.
There's no way that guy's going to make it. There's no way. No way.
I would hide back behind it so they wouldn't talk about me. That was funny. There. How about in terms of your studies? What did you major in?
I didn't major. I took the no major option that our class had, but I did concentrate in international affairs. I took Russian, and I really got interested in Soviet military thought, what was going on inside the heads of Soviet leaders, and I got pretty good at that. One of the instructors that kind of inspired me there was Midgley, which I know Chuck Cushman talked about, Major Midgley in his discussion. But he did a class. I had him for Econ 101, and he did a class where he compared a capitalist economy to a Marxist economy, and did a comparison contrast of the different factors. And I just found that just fascinating, and so I kind of just dove into that.
And now you started your interest in the military academy by reading about the Civil War and World War II, and so you enjoyed studying. You went deep on this.
I really liked history, but I kind of like everything, and that was a difficult thing for me, the academy. In fact, one of the things that attracted me to the academy is you didn't have to choose a major.
Right.
They told you what to do for 2 years. When I was looking at civilian colleges, you get a book that thick and they're like, okay, pick your major out. I'm like,
pick out it all. Yeah.
I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I'm still not sure I know what I want to do, but the cool thing about what I do now in environmental is it's a blend of history and science still. It's more about industrial history, what was going on a property, for example.
Yeah, right.
It all comes together that way. But I
think in this age of specialization, there are those of us who are just kind of broadly curious. I would consider myself similarly minded to yourself. I read history, I read science, I love technology, but I'm just broadly, but I don't want to be shoehorned into one kind of deep thing. So right. I'm with you on that. That's cool. So you became a man of the armor branch. Talk about that. Yeah. What was it about armor that attracted you?
So there's two stories that come out of Buckner we got to get to, but
sure.
Part of it at Buckner, we went to TCAT,
yeah,
and I just thought tanks were really cool.
Yeah,
and a flashback to my childhood, I had gotten into modeling and doing military models, and I tried planes and helicopters and ships, and I could never get the two halves to stick together, but a tank I could do, and so I got really good at tank models. And so,
having built so many of those models myself, I know exactly what you're talking about. That darn ship. Forget the Naval Academy. It never goes together.
No, never. My Bismarck was crooked, I couldn't get it straight.
But a tank, you just put the turret on. It's easy.
Beautiful, baby.
I love it.
That was fun.
That's
yeah.
You know what?
Anyway, I chose armor.
Revell models. The Revell models help steer you toward armor.
That's right. There you go.
I love it. And then TCAT. So TCAT, it shaped a lot of our experience. So
yeah, I think so.
Some away from armor, some toward it. So you like that? You like those tank rides?
Mm-hmm. That was a good time, and I enjoyed that. Another thing that came out of Buckner, I'll touch on. While I was at TCAT, I was with Lawrence Mixon, and for some reason we had half a day off. I must have been on a tank with Lawrence, and we had half a day off. We could do anything we wanted, and Lawrence wanted to go get a haircut.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, a haircut? That's like the last thing I wanted to do. But I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go to get a haircut. And my memory of getting the haircut is we had to walk like 10 miles in the blazing sun to find a barber shop. I don't remember where it was at Knox. But anyway, so we're hiking and hiking. We finally find a barber pole, like this oasis with a barber pole.
Right.
So we go in there to get a haircut. And Lawrence went first, and he loved his haircut. And I sat down, and I was always the guy that kind of had a longer head of hair, you know?
Yeah.
And I sat down, and right about the time the guy gets started, I look over and I realize there's no scissors in this barber shop. All they had was the lawnmowers. Okay. Right. And by the time my head was, I walked away looking like a concentration camp victim.
Yeah.
Walking out of that barber shop.
Yeah.
But that haircut earned me the starting role in the musical we did at Buckner. If you remember, there was a musical there. Tommy Bates was the production manager and the lead. Kathy Stewart was the lead girl. She was the little red-haired girl. And I ended up getting the lead, and the lead role was a yearling that could not let go of being a plebe. And so because my hair looked so stupid, that was why I'm pretty sure that's why I got the role. I could ping really fast too.
You know, Lawrence Mixon, who I went to MIOBC with, Lawrence just accelerated you in your theatrical career by marching 10 miles to get a haircut on a half day off.
Experience of my life. Yeah.
You know, the next time we had a half day off, he said, Lawrence, I'll tell you what I want to do today. I want to shine shoes because I'm really, because you know what? I find that enjoyable.
No, that was it. But through that experience, I got to know Tommy quite well, and
what an amazing
really
guy! Yeah,
when he passed away, that was a bad.
Yeah, it's a real loss to the class. What a talent! Apparently, Mo Dillon was Tommy's mother, and apparently there is a trove of unpublished plays and stories and things that he wrote. He was an amazingly prodigious writer for a young guy, and would have been quite successful, but sadly
talent.
Way. So did that all of that? So I imagine marching in the sun for 10 miles helped you steer you toward the idea of getting on a tank, because at least you could drive over there.
You know, and the other piece, I when I was in scouting as a kid, I developed hypothermia, and I hated cold, wet feet, and so I just thought the idea of having a heater on a vehicle was such a cool idea.
Such a cool idea.
That's another reason I liked armor.
Yeah. Just using technology. Use technology. Don't be used to buy it.
Little did I know the heaters break, and when we're in Germany in the winter with a broken heater.
There's that detail.
It really sucks. There is
that
really
detail, right? So what was your first assignment? How did that all transpire?
I wanted to go to 2nd ACR, but all the smart guys got that one. Yeah. So I went to 11th ACR.
Okay.
And I was in 2nd Squadron, 11th ACR. That was when the East German border was still there. We were the unit at the front line for 5th Corps. 7th Corps abutted us to the south. The town I was in was called Bad Kissingen, West Germany at the time. And just loved it. I started out as a scout platoon leader. The whole border mission was fun. Maneuver was fun. I enjoyed gunnery. It was a neat experience.
How'd you find living overseas? Indiana boy, been to the academy, obviously, but how'd you find that?
You know, one of the things I took from the West Point experience is I wanted to. I realized living inside people's houses and seeing the world from that perspective was a unique angle. Yep. So I wanted to do the same thing in Germany. So I did what we called at the time living on the economy. Mm-hmm. So I actually rented apartments from German families that rented housing out to people.
Okay.
So my first apartment was in Bad Kissingen, kind of in the downtown area, not a far walk from Post. And then my second apartment was in a farm community where the first floor was the dad, the mom, and the daughter. The third floor was the son, daughter-in-law, and 2 granddaughters, and I was on the second floor in between them. Huh. And that was such a cool experience.
And did you interact with them a lot, or were you just kind of come and go?
Every time I paid rent was a schnapps party. That was part of the interaction.
Which, you know what, I really think we should, this whole paying stuff online, I think every time we pay any bill, there should be a schnapps party. I mean, that would be.
Yeah.
Right.
Herr Long and I, and Frau Long. And they could not figure out my name. They thought MC in the air, McDowell.
Yeah.
They thought that was Mr. Dowell. So they called me Herr Dowell.
Hell
That
no.
was my name to my landlord. They didn't speak any English. And early on, I didn't. By the end, I could kind of communicate with them.
Right.
One of the neat stories there, at the tail end of my time in Germany, so I was there for when the wall came down, November, December. We can talk about that. But the tail end of my time there, my landlady, Frau Long, walked up to me and she said she wanted a Truthhähnchen, which in German, that word I didn't recognize. I had never come across that word. And I'm, what in the heck is that? So I had to go get the dictionary and figure out what Truthhähnchen was. She wanted a turkey.
Huh.
And I'm like, why on earth would she want a turkey? So I'm like, okay, I'll get you a turkey. And so I get her the turkey from the PX because they couldn't get them in Germany. So I got her a turkey from the PX and brought it over someday. And then she asked me how to cook the turkey.
Huh.
And I'm like, you wanted a turkey, but you know how to cook a turkey? And what it dawned on me, it was right around Thanksgiving. They were going to give me a Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
Okay. So my German family decided to give me a Thanksgiving dinner before I wasn't it cool? But so I had to call my mom to find out how to cook a turkey,
Right.
and then get the directions translated to German, and then give Frau Long directions for how to. Anyway, that worked out.
I only know how to eat the turkey. Frau Long. I don't know how to cook it.
I had no idea. Did you know how to cook a turkey when you were 22?
No, I still don't.
No, I don't.
Yeah, probably so. I guess you could air fry it. I know how to use an air fryer, so there you go. But I poor Frau Long didn't have an air fryer, so I'd have been stuck. And then how long in Germany did you? How did that transpire? Did you rotate back, go to advanced course? What
I
was
was there
your
for
story?
3 years. I fulfilled my whole tour there.
Hmm.
I was there for when the wall came down, and there's some pieces of that puzzle worth talking about. So when Germany was divided east and west, West Germany had a policy where a person defecting from East Germany could go to the bank and get 100 Deutschmarks.
Right.
That was a law, a German law, and they left that law in place when the wall came down. So all these East Germans were motivated to come to Germany, get their 100 marks, and go shopping in a Western economy for the first time in their lifetimes. And so it stimulated the West German economy, but it also brought East Germans over to West Germany and got them to kind of help bring the country together a little bit. It was a really good strategy.
Uh-huh.
But one of the things I'll never forget, I was in a market, a German market, and there was a table with a pyramid of oranges.
Right.
So the oranges were stacked up in the shape of a pyramid. And standing next to this table was this old woman and this little girl, I presume her granddaughter. And they were holding hands. And the little girl's eyes were like saucers looking at these oranges. And the grandmother was crying.
Oh,
because she was remembering pre-war, pre-wall, when East Germany, or what became Germany, had access to oranges. And her granddaughter, I don't think had ever actually physically seen an orange based on her reaction to that.
In all those years, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Real good example of what Marxism does to.
And did you use the Russian at all? Because you studied the Russian. Did you use it at all?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. Not much at all. There was a little bit of, we would, as part of our border patrol, pretty much everybody we saw were East German soldiers or elitist German soldiers. To my knowledge, I never saw a Russian soldier.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Now you spent the whole tour there. Did you get out of the Army after that?
No, I came back to Germany for advanced course, or I'm sorry, I came back to Fort Knox for advanced course.
Yep.
And I got out after advanced course. I was one of the few of our classmates that got out at the 4-year mark.
Yeah, it was a thing at the time. They offered it, right?
Well, my thing, and I think I've heard Chuck McLaughlin say this. I don't know if he and I talked about it at Armor School or not, but I recognized I was going to be making a career change, either inside the Army or outside the Army, because I was a tank guy.
Yeah.
Things were going light infantry. I was a Russian guy preparing for a war in the European frontier, which wasn't going to happen. So I knew I was making a career change, and I figured if I was going to make a career change, I might as well make it now. I wasn't. the other thing about that, when I looked at my next step in career being a company commander of a tank company,
right,
that just didn't excite me.
yeah,
And I figured if it didn't excite me, I really shouldn't do it. So,
yeah, yeah.
I decided to get out at 4.
That's an interesting point around the mission was so much focused on Europe and the Soviets at the time and large scale war. And then when 91, when it all kind of shifted after the Iraq war, I was an electronic warfare officer whose entire training was to deal with electronic signals on Eastern European battlefield. So
really,
then it was like, okay, that all changed. Now what?
Welcome to the desert.
Yeah, right. So an interesting time, and certainly it gave a chance for a lot of us to pause and say, okay, well, maybe there's a different career path that doesn't involve being in uniform. So what was your first move after getting out?
I went to Procter and Gamble. I worked there for 2 years.
And how did you get connected up with that company?
What's that?
How did you get connected up with Procter and Gamble?
There was a recruiting. I don't remember the name of it. A bunch of guys went to it. It was a recruiting thing where you go in and they teach you how to wear a suit and how to interview, and then they would line up interviews with a bunch of Fortune 500 companies. And I connected with the P&G guy quite well.
Nobody told us coming out of the Army that each of those recruiting firms had a path. So the one I went to in Atlanta was all hooked into the pharmaceutical. So basically, it was all pharmaceutical companies. You went to one where Procter and Gamble was. That's interesting. And what was your first job coming out of the Army?
They called it team coach. They were trying to eliminate the word manager from that corporate culture.
Right.
But I managed 2 groups of warehouse employees at 2 different plants in Green Bay. And then because I'd been a maintenance officer in the Army, I was also in charge of forklift and conveyor maintenance.
Okay.
Which was quite a bit in a paper plant. There's a lot going on there. It was a
lot of moving parts.
A lot of stuff to do.
I'm just I'm not laughing at the role's a significant one, because how significant that is. Some HR person ginned up some, like, you're going to be a coach.
That was my title. Yeah.
Heaven help us with all the different fads that we all have seen in our careers.
That's right.
And you being a team coach coming out of the Army.
Exactly.
Brilliant. A great example of that.
Yeah.
So you went right into the heavy end of it then, with maintaining equipment and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. It was, lift trucks and conveyors aren't anything like tanks and Bradleys, but it was interesting. I did not enjoy managing union workers in a plant environment. That was not a fun experience for me, and I don't know how it could be for anyone, frankly. And so that I was there for 2 years, but I was certain that wasn't my end all after I was there, and I just kind of used it after I realized I was going to be leaving P&G. I used it to kind of soften my military demeanor to where I thought I'd fit in better with the civilian population.
Right.
And then I started looking, and
you stopped hazing people in Russian, because that was kind of part of the lineage.
Exactly right. That is an ineffective leadership technique.
Ineffective. Having been on the receiving end, and then finally understanding what he was saying all those years later.
Right.
Yeah. I think we all went through a little bit of that. And how about family? How did that work with in terms of that?
I met my ex-wife in Green Bay getting knee surgery. Yeah. She was a nurse. I was the guinea pig.
The guy under the knife.
Yeah. My knee still hurts. Actually, there's a lot hurts from that moment. After
I wasn't going to say it.
She is an ex-wife.
I'm glad you said it.
I got a lot of pain that came out of that day.
Well,
still get the shivers. But no, we had 2 daughters. She had a daughter that was part of that marriage. So Laura. Laura's born in 87. What's that make her? I'm horrible at timelines.
Well, my son's 31. He was born in 93. So add 6 onto 31, 37. There you go. Yeah. I just demonstrated my amazing math skills.
Ellie's 29 and Melanie's 25.
Okay.
24, 25.
Good.
They're
And then where are they located? Just because we always make sure we call the kids out. Where are they located now?
Melanie works at McDowell and Associates.
Okay.
In kind of an administrative role.
Right.
Allie is working at Amazon, and
okay.
Laura's in the restaurant business. She's running a bar restaurant place.
All in Michigan?
Yeah, everybody's still in Michigan.
Right. So they got the like Fred Choi's family and friends. You've got all the McDowells right there in Michigan. For those moments when you want to get the whole group together. Good for you.
I've been dating Angela for a while, number of years now. She's
right.
Chemistry professor at MSU and Michigan State University, and she's pretty smart. She's an expert in quantum chemistry. You know what that is?
A testament
somehow
to her
I stumble into those. Yeah, somehow I stumble into people that max the SAT math score. I don't know.
Right.
It's not me, but I tend to run into people like that. She has 2 kids, Trevor, who's sophomore at Michigan State, and Erica, who's senior in high school. She's going to be going to Michigan State here in the fall. So,
okay,
that's my that's that background.
Michigan through and through.
Yep,
that's great.
But they've traveled quite a bit. She has an interesting history. Her dad was a Vietnam helicopter pilot. He's actually in the Air Force. And when they got low on helicopter pilots, they went to the Air Force and got some guys to come to help the Army out. He ended up flying Black Ops with Special Forces in the 70s. And if you can imagine this, in the course of 12 months, his tour in Vietnam, he flew over 400 combat missions.
Holy cow.
If you can imagine, I can't even conceive of.
Well, that was early days. So they were figuring things out. I mean, it wasn't like there was a lot of doctrinal experience or combat experience to go back on. They were trying to figure it out as they went. Right? That's crazy.
Well, he was there in 71, I think, and he was working with a lot of Montagnards and doing a lot of stuff across the line that didn't exist and stuff like that. Anyway, interesting stories. Another story I wanted to share with you, and you decide if it fits or not. It relates.
Sure.
This relates to Tommy Bates. Just a brief one. Yeah. Tommy, if you're not aware of this, the prep school at West Point now, the auditorium there is named Bates Auditorium for Tommy.
I didn't know that.
The way I found out about that, I was helping with West Point admission stuff. And I got some kids from Detroit to go there. Well, one of the kids I became pretty close friends with, he invited me to visit him at the prep school while he was there before he became a plebe the following year. And he physically took me to the auditorium because he knew I was class of 86. And there's a plaque there with Tommy's name on it and a little write-up about Tommy Bates. So he must have been, when he was at prep school, he must have been active in theater as well. And I presume that's why
that's a really great piece of information.
Isn't that cool to know?
All classmates should know that. That's great.
Yeah, so it's really, if you're at West Point and you knew Tommy, or even if you vaguely knew Tommy, it's worth your time to go to the prep school and look at Bates Auditorium just to see the little
absolutely
display
pay homage to a very talented guy and classmate for sure.
Amazing.
I think we all know Tommy because of his work on both your career. Getting you
my acting career,
your acting career, which your haircut helped to get started.
That's right.
And then of course That Willard of Ours was the show that we put on, right?
That's right. That was awesome.
That's fantastic. And then and track your career path a little bit. So how did you end up at McDowell and Associates? Because that was that long-term at graduation potential. Yeah. How did that warm up over time?
That was that hook, right?
Yeah.
I started out here kind of in a marketing role. I didn't have a strong engineering background. We're a pretty heavy engineering company. And then
at what point did you decide I'm going to give the family business a go?
After P&G and that, I was ready for something.
Okay.
One of the things that frustrated me in that corporate environment at that level, if I wanted to spend $200, I had to give a presentation to my boss. And if he liked the presentation, he'd ask me to give that to his boss and then the boss's boss. And it took so much effort to get approval to spend $200 Now, what I didn't recognize, I'm a little thick. I didn't recognize those were opportunities for me to show myself to these higher level people. That's what that was about.
That's what that was
I
about.
didn't get it. I thought they were just wasting my time. But honestly, that's what I thought. But here, I know what you're saying.
So now when that young intern of your 64 employees comes in to present a thing to you about some expenditure where you're like, hey, I've got to control expenses as president of the company, you know what he's thinking about his time and what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly right. It's so obvious. I need to spend this money. Just give it to me. No. So,
right.
So the cool thing about an environment like McDowell Associates, smaller, not so much of that noise going on, and it's a more flat organization. You can get things done. So
well, you're within
I enjoyed that
size of a village, right? 140 people, so you know everyone in the company.
Yeah, kind of took me back to being a scout platoon leader, and I'm sure your platoon leader experience was this. The amount of responsibility we had, as young college graduates was extraordinary. Like when we were on the border, if I was the border officer, I was responsible for the East-West German border and the reports that were going. I mean, what a level of responsibility to give a young lieutenant, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in civilian life, and it certainly didn't happen at Procter & Gamble, but it's a little more like that at a company like McDowell Associates, a smaller firm. I like it.
Yeah. You have, I think if you went through all of our classmates, and one of the things that's fascinating about talking to everyone is everyone has that moment where you're like 27 years old and you realize you have millions of dollars and huge amounts of destructive power at your fingertips, and you are the decision point. You're in a chain, right? But it's a weighty responsibility. I don't think that ever really leaves us, over time. So you started marketing at McDowell & Associates and obviously worked your way up. How was it being in the family business, and what was that like?
There's an interesting component of family businesses I've studied where one of the downsides of moving into family business is you inherit the founder's partners. And those relationships were founded on years and years of hard work. And those folks have kind of earned their place in the organization because of all the work they did 10 years ago. They're not necessarily functioning at that level today, right? And so that is a difficult component of taking over family business. But that part's behind us now, so that's good. But that was uncomfortable. But the rest of it, I really enjoy it. It's really fun. I got a master's degree at Wayne State while I was here working full time.
And what was that in business?
No, civil environmental engineering.
Oh, sorry, right.
I went back. Yeah, so I get the concentration in international affairs from West Point. Then I come back and be an engineer.
You really are a generalist, and that's a compliment, right? Yeah,
I think so, but some would argue.
And then, what is a day in the life of the president at this point? Do you spend more time with people? Do you spend more time business development, finding contracts? What generally, what does your life look like in that role?
Right now, it's looking forward and sustaining. So trying to sustain what we have, and then trying to look forward for opportunities of growth. So, if what I've been telling folks, each of our departments is a box, and our folks have gotten accustomed to working inside their box. And to grow the company, the boxes have to get bigger, and the boxes have to interact with each other better. So those are the two main focuses I'm working on, and that's more one-on-one conversations with people, kind of hinting different things they ought to be doing, and that's coming along. The other piece is fixing the antiquated systems we have that are in our accounting group that are bogging us down and preventing us from growing. So some of it's fun, some of it is less than fun.
Everyone thinks being in charge is fun. It's making decisions on accounting systems, really, when it all said and done.
And the problem with it is you have to figure out the way the current broken system works to make sure you know how to fix it, right? And so
that's right.
Studying a system that's broken is really less than fun. I mean, that is drudgery, but it's all right.
Right, and not anything near environmental engineering or the type of engineering your company does, right? You're back in this.
It's all flow charts and arrows and dotted lines and
yeah. That's a whole
yeah.
that's a whole topic. So looking back, if you were to go back in time to any point in your life, really, but any point in your span of experiences, and with your knowledge you have now, where would you go, and what advice would you give yourself?
Um, Watch for opportunities and seize those. And I and some of those are foreshadowed with coincidence. So what I've seen in my life is when there's a coincidence, there's usually more to it than just being a coincidence. And so I've learned to study coincidences when they come up and try to figure out if there's a higher order giving me a message, what that message is, what I ought to be taking on, because I found there's a lot more to it. And there's a lot of turns I made that I look back, wow, how did I miss that chance? A lot of things I won't forget. You know, I looked at. I don't want to say I regret getting out of the Army, but I do look back at my decision to get out of the Army often.
Sure.
It was particularly hard during Desert Storm when I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin, counting stacks of toilet paper, and our classmates are on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And that was a difficult time for me. So I would say look for those moments.
I think we all probably had a version of that when the second Gulf War was going on, and we had classmates who were, battalion commanders, et cetera, and we're sitting in meeting payroll in some place.
Right. Right. When one of the things I did, there was an economic downturn that affected our company, 2008, 2009, and basically my choice was to move or find something else to do with my spare time, and I decided to write it out. But I started doing work with the West Point Field Force and the outreach group.
Yeah.
And the person here that heads up Field Force gave me a congressional district to take on, and I looked at it and I realized there were not any students from that congressional district at the academy at that time. So that congressperson had not ever sent, or at least at that moment, had not sent anyone to the academy. And I was like, wow, that's kind of bad. And I was on the district I had was, if 8 Mile is kind of the boundary between Detroit and near ring suburbs. I thought, well, let me go across 8 Mile and see what Detroit's doing. And I looked at Detroit and discovered the same thing. There was nobody at West Point from Detroit. And that's when I realized there was a big problem. And I decided to take that on. So I started doing outreach with West Point to try to encourage recruitment of kids from urban populations, which goes back to my childhood where I was as a kid. And over 15 years, we and I just pulled out of this recently, but we became very successful. Had a great team of people I was working with. But to give you some examples, one of our the first group I was with, Mark McGinnis, is in the Army now. He's aviation, but he was the third in a choice of candidates that we had, and West Point didn't want to let him in because he had a weak math score. And we were advocating for him from Michigan. We had an outreach officer at West Point that was advocating for him, and we were able to get him in. And he went to prep school, and whatever gaps were in his math base, he fixed at prep school. And then he went in, and he ended up becoming a regimental commander. He ended up getting the Chinese equivalent of the Rhodes Scholarship. It's not coming to mind right now, but huge national scholarship. And he got his master's degree in China, and now he's just killing it in the Army. So that was one of the first guys. Another girl came out of our program, became a Rhodes Scholar. She's just recently come back from there. So we've been able to funnel some very talented kids out of Detroit into West Point through that outreach program. It's been
huge success,
quite successful. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's hard to, and there's this I want to say anti-DEI push now with the new administration. But I think they're missing out that the kids that come from a disadvantaged economic background are not playing on an equal playing field with kids that come from a place where there are economic advantages. And so to pretend that we can assess merit when you have these gaps in kids learning because of the challenges they face is not an accurate way, I don't think, to fill out our officer corps. So hopefully that direction comes around and we get a little more.
It's certainly a complicated issue, but I think the really great part of that story is that you saw a gap, and as a graduate, you filled it.
Right.
And I think as graduates, we all have a relationship with the academy because it's too intense an experience to not. Some people just walk away from it completely. Others kind of go to football games and
right.
things like that. But I think there's an active layer of being involved to help increase its quality that goes to projects like you took on, which is, hey, there's no flow here. I need to connect things that are disconnected to get that flow going. And obviously you were successful in that, anywhere from the congressional people just not used to sending people to the academy to the academy not looking, to the schools not feeling like they've got the right candidates. And you
anti-Army viewpoint
of success story.
Yeah,
it's a tremendous success story. Good for you.
Yeah, it was that. So that's something I'm pretty proud of.
I justifiably so. That's one.
Yeah. The other there's another thing I've been doing, and this started with Allie when she was 9. She was the fastest soccer player, and I started coaching track.
Really? And, there you go.
And my first coaching experience was at West Point as a firstie. Right? Remember we could coach intramural teams.
Yeah.
And so I coached cross country, wrestling, and then track. And the F3 track team, we ended up getting runner up in the brigades. So I kind of got a bug for coaching then. And then when I had kids that were old enough to do sports, I really got into coaching again. But I've been coaching track, still coach track now. It's what I do for my physical outlet. So we coach three times a week. I've had a number of national champions in different events. Got a couple of really good athletes right now. I don't know if you know track and field times, but 8th graders running a 2:11 800 meters half mile, which is very fast for an 8th grader. And a girl that I've been training since she was 7, she's also an 8th grader. She's got the top indoor shot put score in the country right now for her age group. And
is this a local club, like or is it part of?
I founded it. Yeah, I founded it under my daughter's soccer team, so I used their logo. I just kept their logo.
You founded it, and it's like a local club that you founded that you are cultivating these athletes and their talent.
Right. It's a lot of fun. I've had a couple kids come through my program and go to West Point. A couple kids come to my program that are going to West Point just to get in shape because they have an idea of what it takes to succeed at the academy physically. And anyway, it's been a great outlet. I've had a good time with it.
Great project. Good for you. It's interesting how many of our classmates in West Point graduates in general do pick up some form of coaching because it's leadership, it's mentoring and that later in life. So that's tremendous. Okay. Yeah. And you're still doing that club.
Correct. Yeah, I'll do that. I could see myself doing that into retirement if I hold up physically. It's
Yeah.
So it's a good time.
Good for you.
It's invigorating.
That's brilliant. Is there anything we have not covered? Those I really appreciate you for bringing those up. Is there anything else we have not covered? I want to make sure we cover all those.
I don't think I made some notes here. Oh, one thing I did. This is an interesting story. Sure. After graduation, a lot of my classmates were getting married. And I'm sure out of F3, and I'm sure you had similar things.
Yeah, sure.
They scheduled their weddings on consecutive weekends. And when I sat down kind of at the end of first year, and I just decided to get out a map and see where I'd been in the United States. I went to Norwar, so I'd been to Alaska. I went to Hawaii with the Glee Club, so those two were off the map. And I just checked off all the maps. And there's like 4 or 5 states I hadn't been to yet. We had a wedding in L.A. that was Rod and Mandy Sturdivant, a wedding in Seattle that was Joe Elliott, and then a wedding, Jeff and Elena Hyduke back in New York.
Yeah.
So I did the road trip, and It took a week and a half to get to LA from New York. I stopped at Indiana and said hi to family, and then just hauled it. The trip from LA to Seattle was pretty easy in terms of time wise. I had time to go to Reno and mess around, but then Seattle to New York, that was a haul. I did the.
There's no way around it. That's a haul.
It was a long drive.
Having grown up in California and driven my car back and forth to New York 3 times, I know that haul, man.
Well, the way I knocked it out, I had a cousin that lived in North Dakota, so I drove from Seattle to North Dakota nonstop. It was a 36-hour Mountain Dew trip. And then I
those were the days
there, and then that got me ahead of the game, and then I could make it. But
I can't make it 30 minutes now without stopping in the Wawa just to take a toilet break. You know, it's like those were the days.
That was when beef and cheddars had come out, and I loved the Arby's beef and cheddar. And so I everywhere there was an Arby's, that was my meal on those trips. I would just bounce off, get an Arby's, and then get back on.
I had a thing on those trips where I would calculate the distance between where I was on the odometer and then the city on the sign, because we didn't have GPS back then. You had to kind of manually do the calculation. And I would laugh because the city would move because it would move. The odometer was steady, but then the distance remaining to the city was off. And so I was like, okay, the city just got closer. Wait a minute, the city just got farther away. But I actually would amuse myself for hours and hours with this math game of, oh my gosh, Des Moines has moved. So anyway, it's just like the things you do to keep your mind occupied.
My math game was to calculate how long it would take, and then try to beat that mark.
Right.
And so I drove to Montana very
Arby's
fast. I was flying to Montana. You maybe you should cut this one out. So I'm in Montana in a construction zone. There was no construction, but there's pylons, so it's a one lane road with an Arby's sandwich. I had to be going 85, okay, and with the pylons, you're not allowed to do that, right? And I'm trying to eat an Arby's, okay,
right. And I got to have my Arby's
all over me. And I look in the mirror, and there's police lights in my rearview mirror. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to jail. You know, like you can't drive this. So I pull over, and the cop just blows
right by you.
Let me go. Unbelievable.
He's got somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And you're wiping the Arby's off, hoping to not get caught.
Yeah. That was when I got to Canandaigua. I knocked on Elena's door, and her mom let me in, and she goes, "Wow, you're here!" And it was like the day of the wedding. And she goes, "Do you need anything?" I'm like, "Is there somewhere I can take a nap?" and so she put me on the floor in the office or something and closed the door.
I think
it's really noisy in here. I'm like, that won't matter.
We could actually pivot this podcast to just tracking down as many classmates as possible to just talk about the post-graduation thunder runs that we all made to each other's weddings.
Okay.
Now, I didn't get married till later, but I went to Florida. I went to Forest Carpenter in New Mexico and just was all over the place. Tom Hohenstein and I drove across New Mexico into this huge storm in a little Honda Civic to try to make it to Forest House. We all have these stories because everyone got married in their home state. Yeah. We were all kind of doing thunder runs all over a very large country. So that
was fun. That was really fun.
You know,
we had new cars, they're not going to break.
It's one of those things nobody really remembers, but it really was part of the fun is you got a chance to go out. And of course, at the end of every one of these thunder runs was a bit of a party because we just graduated from West Point. So there you go.
There's nothing like being in the wedding party. That's like the best single event you can do is to be friends with the bride and groom, right? I mean,
it kind of is.
That's a fun experience.
I've been into some, My son goes. My son's when he goes through it now. I call him the wedding crasher. He goes to every wedding. You know, he's always got weddings. His demographics going through it. Doug, what a fantastic catch up. I really appreciate the time, and you are an amazing character of the class, and what great stories. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good talking to you. Take care.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe button. With over 900 living graduates, we have a lot of stories to tell, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.